2 weeks ago, I myself made an offer to the governor. After months of hearing how his proposal for broad-based taxes for increased spending had support within the legislature, Republican and Democrat, House and Senate, for passage, and after months of having the same discussion round and round, out of frustration, I finally said to the governor, if you have the votes, if you believe you have the votes, I will give you your chance to make that case on this House floor. Today is that day. I told the governor I would give him notice. I would give him a full week to make sure he had secure all the votes he believed he already had. I told the governor I would personally ask our members, upon request, to sit and discuss with him his proposal and their rationale for supporting it or opposing it. I told the governor I would not take a position. I would not push people one direction or the other. I would not interfere with the process. I would let the chips fall as they may. Today, I stand before you and can say with complete honesty, I have kept that commitment. Today, I will not ask you to vote for or against this amendment. It deserves to stand or fall on its own merits. But today, we are faced with a decision. We are at a fork in the road. And maybe we should have reached that fork in the road some time ago. Maybe it should have been after we put a balanced budget with no tax increases on his desk on June 30th and he vetoed it. Maybe it should have been when we attempted to override the veto on agreed-to line items for human service agencies and schools. Maybe it should have been immediately after we passed a stopgap budget to send desperately needed funds to our human service agencies and our schools once again. Maybe I should have demanded today that we vote on the governor's proposal that he's been insistent for over a month that he has the votes for privately in these meetings. But for sake of moving the process forward, we let them change their proposal at the last minute, file the amendment at 2 o'clock yesterday, and not even show it to us till yesterday evening. Because we need to move this process forward. We are at a fork in the road, and today is the day we choose a path. If this amendment passes, I believe we will have a budget in no time. That budget may or may not be in the best interest of the people of Pennsylvania, but we will have a budget. If not, it's time to come to the reality of what can pass and what cannot, and get about the business of negotiating a complete final plan for expenditures in this state over the next year. I stood at this podium 9 months ago when I first took this job. And I stood here with optimism and idealism and faith in our democracy and hope for our future. I still hold those ideals today. You can have faith in our democracy and hope for our future, even through troubled waters and disagreements. I still believe there's a way to formulate an agreement on the issues that divide us. I still believe we can agree to reform our public pension system. I still believe we can bring our liquor system into the 21st century. I still believe we can alleviate burdens upon each and every homeowner across this state in a way that ensures their property taxes just don't rise again in the future. I still believe we can increase funding for education, and we can reform the way we spend that $27 billion so that we know we're getting the biggest bang for our buck with increased accountability and standards. And I still believe we can balance a budget in a manner that funds our core functions of government and is respectful to the people who foot the bill for that operation. It can be done. Today does not represent that sort of complete agreement, but today is a step, as many of our members have pointed out, to recognizing that that day must come sooner rather than later. After I took this job, many folks inside and outside this building had talked to me about how this would be the most frustrating but yet thrilling job I would ever have. I could say with 100% certainty that is not the case. The most frustrating and thrilling job I've ever had is being the parent of 3 children. Sometimes I feel like I'm the parent of 203 children. But as the parent of 3 children at home, my oldest son is 7 years old. And I remember when he first grew to the age where you really had an interaction with him, 6 months, 9 months, the first year. One of the first real interactions we had together was putting together puzzles. And at that age, you're putting together a puzzle, and it's kind of a puzzle, it's kind of not a puzzle, but it's really, you've got, this wooden board, and you've got pictures of farm animals, and you put the farm animals where the picture goes. And if it's a cow, it moos. If it's a goat, it baas. If it's a pig, it goes oink oink. But that's the challenge to that puzzle. And then as he grew older, he would move to more complex puzzles. And we'd be putting together, puzzles that would take our entire living room floor. The pieces would be the size of his head, but it would be Lightning McQueen from Cars, or it would be a dinosaur, or it'd be a train. And then as he grew just a little bit older, it would be more complex puzzles. Until a couple years ago, he had no interest in puzzles anymore. And I often wondered to myself, why this sudden disinterest in putting together puzzles? Instead, he moved on to Lincoln Logs and Legos. And what I came to understand was my son had already determined when you put together a puzzle, the end, the finish, the grand finale is already predetermined. There's no room for deviation. There's no room for creativity. There's no room for thinking outside the box. He wanted to take his thoughts, his imagination, his abilities to the next level, to see what could be done if he challenged himself. When we began this budget process, I often talked about it as a jigsaw puzzle. And we had to figure out, how do we put together the pieces of education reform, pension reform, liquor reform, revenue, balancing with expenditures, property tax reform. How do we put those pieces together? And just recently I came to the realization the reason we can't do it is because we fall victim to a lack of creativity and a lack of imagination. And today we're going to take a vote where everybody on the outside world is going to fall victim to Democrats should stay unified because they've got to protect their governor, and Republicans should stay unified because they're against this governor. Maybe this is a discussion we need to have today. Maybe this is a vote that is needed to get us to beyond putting together puzzle pieces. We need to take those items. We need to build new buildings. We need to build a different future. We need to think outside the box. And as long as we're having discussions about, we've got to put the PIT, the personal income tax puzzle piece where it says it goes, or this severance tax piece where it says it goes, we're never going to create a bolder vision for where we want this state to go. We're going to continue to have the same discussion year after year after year. We're going to see our liquor system be the same liquor system 80 years from now as it was 80 years ago. We're going to continue to have folks talk about property tax relief and never see anything occur. We're going to continue to have the same arguments about revenues and expenditures and funding education, but yet we're all still frustrated with the results we get from that educational system. When we had that discussion on swearing-in day, I told you, each of us, including myself, to look in the mirror and make sure that when we complete our term together, we were worthy of our place in history. We now have the opportunity to live those words. I'm not a man who lives with my faith on my sleeve. I have a personal, deep relationship with the Lord above, and that's a relationship between me and my Maker. But I firmly believe each of us is put into each situation we face for a reason. Each challenge we face is no more than each of us can handle. It is no accident that the 203 members of this body were brought together in the year 2015 to change Pennsylvania. We have that opportunity to do so. Today is not that day, but tomorrow, the 100th day of this budget impasse, I would challenge each of you to wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, and come to this position with a different perspective. Because it is time to get about the business of getting this done. It's time to take ideas and formulate them and put them together to build a better future. It's time to put aside Republican and Democrat, governor versus legislature, political philosophies versus political philosophies, and talking points versus talking points. It's time to rise to the greater good. And that discussion can be had between each and every one of us. It doesn't have to be a big, fancy room with only the legislative leaders or the governor. I will have that conversation with any one of you who wants to join me as we keep the charge we were presented with by the folks in this state to exit this position in a better way than we found it. So today we make this vote, but tomorrow we build together, we lead together, and we bring this impasse to a conclusion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.